that if Oklahoma makes the playoff as expected, how the projection and forecasting from those games, is going to be talked about and bantied about. Like if Oklahoma wins the national championship and they beat one or two SEC teams on the way to doing it, then boy, is that going to change a lot of people's narrative. Versus if Oklahoma goes to the semifinals and they play fill in the blank Georgia and they lose by 21 points, then that's going to fill another narrative, and there's going to be all sorts of bantering back and forth because of those results. That's a storyline sidelight to this that I didn't really consider until just now.
Oh, it really is, Mark. And I think, it's exciting to get to kind of on the field discussion about this as well. So I think a good point that was made about Oklahoma, because the narrative is still there. I think, specifically understanding and reading some things from SEC people that, that narrative is still there that, Oklahoma's a great offensive team, but they can't win the big game. They don't have good enough defense. So if what we've been talking about all spring and summer comes to fruition and the defense is, really that much better, and to your point, Oklahoma beats an SEC team or two in the playoffs this year, I think that puts that into perspective in terms of, Oklahoma's a real player in the SEC going forward. And I think, and some of our OU fans might hear that are on here may disagree with that in terms of going slow. And I had talked with some of our folks there at Last Word on Sports, and we talked about one of the questions was, what does the adjustment look like? Oklahoma has been a team near term that has ran the Big 12, and overall they've been part of the same conference, the Big 6, the Big 8, the Big 12, kind of now the Big 12 -2. They've been part of that same conference. What does it mean when they go to another conference where off the bat maybe they're not one of the top two? I mean, and they certainly probably won't be. I mean, you have Alabama and Georgia as two, huge brands on the field right now, and Oklahoma's probably, maybe right there with Georgia, but maybe a little bit behind in terms of what that on the field production looks like. So what does that look like? And I said, if Oklahoma in 10 years, after being in the SEC for 10 years, if Oklahoma has won 3 SEC championships and have played for 5 SEC championships in those 10 years, I think you could call that success, understanding. But I think that the people that look at this specifically from the Oklahoma side, if you think that Oklahoma is going to be, dominating anywhere near at the same level as they did in the Big 12, you're fooling yourselves. And Oklahoma people have to be prepared as they go into this in terms of what that life looks like in the SEC. They have to be prepared for some 8-4, 9-3 seasons and still be a really good football team. But knowing that a really good football team in the SEC might be 8-4, 9-3.
Well, I certainly appreciate the Rod Farva pointing out that I don't know if I sound different to you, Jason, but that my mic must not have been connected or whatever. So anyway, it defaulted to the camera mic. So hopefully everybody can hear me a little bit better now. Starvel is saying that the SEC is overrated. Every time Oklahoma plays an SEC team, they hang half 100 on them. Well, the last time was 28 points, and that was pretty meaningless against LSU. And then the 34 points against Alabama, those were pretty meaningless points too. Now the 48 against Georgia, absolutely. The 31 and 34 the last 2 times against Tennessee, that was like 2014-15. Those Tennessee teams won 7 and 8 games. I think the half a hundred's a bit of a stretch, but in the 30s, yes. In the high 20s and 30s.
And I think that the funny thing about this is we talked about this. It's sort of like, and I'm trying to think of a good comparison. I can't really think of one off the top of my head. It's coming from a team like Oklahoma, specifically, maybe not so much Texas, but historically, Oklahoma has hated with a passion the SEC conference, and it's just the narrative is so different now. Understanding people that hated the SEC now, by and large, I think most Oklahoma people are on board with this, are excited about this, about what this means. But I think at the same time, there's still some of those people that says, "Oh, I will never be in the stadium and chant SEC." So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that looks differently with you being part of the cool kids club and sort of as opposed to being, kind of on the outside looking in. And I saw a podcast, Josh Pate, which I love watching some of his stuff. He had said yesterday on one of his shows, he said, everybody, let's just wait for, I think it's October 9th, October 7th or October 9th. October in the Cotton Bowl, Oklahoma's playing Texas at 11 a.m. When you hear the SEC chant reverberating through the Cotton Bowl, you'll know it's real at that point, and it's going to happen. I know there's a lot of people that don't say, "I'll never say this," or it's not part of, Oklahoma's never shouted Big 12. But I think when you're part of a conference that is so dominant like the SEC, I think it gives maybe a little bit of pride in terms of being part of that. Certainly, you're not always rooting for your own conference. However, when it comes to bowl games and stuff like that, you want your own conference to do good and want your conference to win national championships. If you're not part of it, unless it's maybe your rival. I mean, there's not. If Texas gets into a national championship game, while they're in the SEC, you're not going to see Oklahoma fans cheering for them. However, having said that, I think it'll be interesting the way Oklahoma fans, Texas fans treat the being part of the SEC more so now. As are we completely in, or is it one of those things where we're still kind of on the outside looking in, kind of hating what traditionally the SEC has been about?
So Kire Costner made a comment. I apologize if I mispronounced your name. Excuse me. That I hear brought up from time to time concerning some of these other teams in the SEC, with the SEC, of course, becoming even more dominant and difficult to play in. Let's understand something that Jason outlined. I've talked about it a number of times, that the money involved, first and foremost, and there are other factors and reasons, but Arkansas, Texas A&M, those teams, those schools, those institutions, programs are not looking to leave the SEC. That is the last thing in the world they're going to do. Even if they're looking at going 4-8 for the next 10 years at Arkansas, there's too much money, too much prestige, too much everything, too much protection, too much provision for them to be going to anything to try to save anything. No, there's no chance. However, when you think about this in terms of the thought about an old Southwest Conference, I think, we had talked about this maybe a week ago, a little bit more than a week ago, Mark, when we had discussed, and we haven't talked about that much today, but in terms of what the scheduling and what the divisions, might look like. And you had said, based on your experience, the reason that the SEC network put up those pod graphics, on the show was that it was kind of a trial. Like, what do people think about this? What do they like? And I think everything that I've been reading and seeing, I think we're going to get to. I think it's going to be a pod. I don't think it's going to be a division. I think they're going to do the pods, and I mean, I think it'll be interesting. I think we're going to get to a 9-game schedule. But having said that, everything that I've seen looks like you're going to have Oklahoma, Texas, Arkansas, and Missouri as part of that pod. I think one of the interesting things was that Texas A&M. I think we thought that they probably would be part of that pod, but they'll probably go elsewhere. I'm thinking that maybe this was a kind of a pat on the back that Sankey gave to A&M. Was like, you guys quit disputing this and quit
complaining about Oklahoma and specifically Texas being part of the SEC, we might throw you a little bone here. So I think, you know, that has a little bit of an old Big 12 Southwest Conference flavor to it. And I think really the reason why they would do this more than anything is with those pods, certainly you're going to play everybody in your pod, and then there's going to be cross, you know, games that you have with each pod. And that guarantees some big time matchups that the SEC is going to want. You're going to have an Oklahoma, Alabama every year. You're going to have an Oklahoma, Georgia every year. You're going to have an Oklahoma, Auburn every year. You're going to have a Texas, Georgia, Texas, Alabama. You're going to have these matchups that they're going to love to see on the field, while still bringing something unique, because obviously no other conference has 16 teams. Hence, no other conference has the opportunity to have a pod type system, you know, situation come into play. And so I think additionally, the intrigue that we talk about off the field with what's going to happen, and then I think there's going to be as much intrigue understanding what this looks like. Is it a pod versus a division? Is it a 9-game schedule? Is it even a 10-game schedule, conference schedule? Is it how do you determine who goes to the championship game? Is it a, you know, obviously the two best records would from each pod would certainly make it to the SEC championship game. However, what if two teams are tied? You know, there's been some thoughts that I've seen, you know, whoever has the highest ranking in the college football playoff rankings go. And I know you're good.
Oh, Lord, we're giving these people more power to determine based on their opinion. My word.
So the tiebreaker thing it's a little clunky. I think a little clumsy. That's why, you know, initially I thought the division might bring more weight. And, you know, Mark, we haven't even talked about the fact that this is going to delay the expansion of the college football playoffs, most certainly. I'm not sure, you know, probably till 2025, but I think that's, you know, what that schedule looks like is going to be very, very intriguing to see.